One is Not Born a Woman by Monique Wittig, Part 2. It is, then, this movement that we can put in question for the meaning that it gave to feminism. It so happens that feminism in the last century could never resolve its contradictions on the subject of nature slash culture, women slash society. Women started to fight for themselves as a group and rightly considered that they shared common features. Hold on. A result of repression. As a result of oppression. But for them, these features were natural and biological rather than social. They went so far as to adopt the Darwinist theory of evolution. They did not believe, like Darwin, however, that women were less evolved than men, but they did believe that male and female natures had diverged in the course of evolutionary development, and that society at large reflected this polarization. The failure of early feminism was that it only attacked the Darwinist change of female inferiority, while accepting the foundations of this charge, namely the view of woman as unique. And finally, it was women scholars and not feminists who scientifically destroyed this theory. But the early feminists had failed to regard history as a dynamic process which develops from the conflicts of others. Furthermore, they still believed, as men do, that the cause or origin of their oppression lay within themselves. And therefore, after some astonishing victories, the feminists of this first front found themselves at an impasse out of a lack of reasons to fight. They upheld the illogical principle of equality in difference, an idea now being born again. They fell back into the trap which threatens us once again, the myth of woman. Thus, it is our historical task, and only ours, to define what we call oppression in materialist terms, to make it evident that women are a class, which is to say that the category woman as well as the category man are political and economic categories, not eternal ones. Our fight aims to suppress men as a class, not through a genocidal but a political struggle. Once the class of men disappears, women as a class will disappear as well, for there are no slaves without masters. Our first task, it seems, is to always thoroughly dissociate woman, the class within which we fight, and woman, the myth. For woman does not exist for us. It is only an imaginary formation, while woman is the product of a social relationship. We felt this strongly when everywhere we refused to be called a woman's liberation movement. Furthermore, we have to destroy the myth inside and outside ourselves. Woman is not each one of us, but the political and ideological formation which negates woman, the product of a relation of exploitation. Woman is there to confuse us, to hide the reality woman. In order to be aware of being a class, and to become a class, we first have to kill the myth of woman, including its most seductive aspects. I think about Virginia Woolf when she said that the first task of a woman writer is to kill the angel in the house. But to become a class which we do not have to suppress our individual selves. And since no individual can be reduced to his or her oppression, we are also confronted with the historical necessity of constituting ourselves as the individual subjects of our history as well. I believe this is the reason why all these attempts at new definitions of woman are blossoming now. What is at stake, and of course not only for women, is an individual definition as well as a class definition. For one has acknowledged oppression, one needs to know and experience the fact that one can constitute oneself as a subject as opposed to an object of oppression, that one can become someone in spite of oppression, that one has one's own identity. There is no possible fight for someone deprived of an identity, no internal motivation for fighting, since, although I can fight only with others, first I fight for myself. The question of the individual subject is historically a difficult one for everybody. Marxism, the last avatar of materialism, the science which has politically formed us, does not want to hear anything about a subject. Marxism has rejected the transcendental subject, the subject as constitutive of knowledge, the pure consciousness. All that thinks per se, before all experience, has ended up in the garbage can of history because it claimed to exist outside of matter, prior to matter, and needed God, spirit, or soul to exist in such a way. This is what is called idealism. As for individuals, they are only the product of social relations. Therefore, the consciousness can only be alienated. Marx, in the German ideology, says precisely that individuals of the dominating class are also alienated, though they are the direct producers of ideas that alienate the classes oppressed by them. But since they draw visible advantages from their own alienation, they can bear it without too much suffering. There exists such a thing as class consciousness, but a consciousness which does not refer to a particular subject, except as participating in general conditions of exploitation at the same time as the other subjects of their class, all sharing the same consciousness. As for the political class problems, outside of the class problems as traditionally defined, that one could encounter, for example, sexual problems, they were considered bourgeoisie problems that would disappear with the final victory of the class struggle. Individualistic, subjectivist, petite bourgeoisie, these were the labels given to any person who had shown problems which could not be reduced to the class struggle itself. Thus, Marxism has denied the members of oppressed classes the attribute of being a subject. In doing this, Marxism, because of the ideological and political power this revolutionary science immediately exercised upon the workers' movement and all other political groups, has prevented all categories of oppressed peoples from constituting themselves historically as subjects of their struggle, for example. This means that the masses do not fight for themselves, but for the party or its organizations. And when an economic transformation took place, and a private property constitution of the socialist state, no revolutionary change took place within the new society because the people themselves did not change.